The upper layer is the world we see. Below that is ancient ice. Below the ice is rock. And in some places between the two are enormous pockets of water. Scientists have discovered these hidden systems using radar, satellite measurements, gravity data, and seismic instruments. The discoveries have repeatedly changed our understanding of the continent. And they raise an intriguing possibility. If nature can create enormous hidden spaces beneath Antarctica, then a structure discovered at the surface could potentially be connected to something much deeper. But there is another mystery: the color itself. Why would a gate appear red in a landscape dominated by white and blue? There are several natural possibilities. Antarctica contains iron-rich minerals, volcanic rocks, and other materials that can produce striking colors when exposed to weathering. In some regions, snow and ice can even appear red because of microscopic organisms. One famous phenomenon is known as blood falls. At Taylor Glacier, a reddish liquid emerges from the ice and stains the surrounding snow. For decades, scientists wondered what caused the strange color. The explanation turned out to be extraordinary in its own way. The water contains iron-rich material that oxidizes when exposed to air, creating a deep red appearance. So a red feature in Antarctica does not automatically indicate something artificial. Nature itself can produce colors that look almost impossible. But if the red gate has a geometric shape, that changes the question. Color can be natural. Geometry is more difficult to explain. A straight vertical surface, two matching sides, a horizontal upper section, a consistent depth, and perhaps most importantly, repetition. These are the characteristics investigators would examine. Because one of the strongest clues of human construction is not beauty. It is regularity. Nature creates symmetry, but artificial structures often create symmetry with purpose. A doorway is designed around movement. A tunnel has dimensions. A wall separates one space from another. A staircase repeats a specific pattern. If the red gate shows these features, scientists would have to determine whether they were created by human activity, another intelligent process, or unusual geology. That last possibility should never be ignored. Antarctica is a geological laboratory. Volcanic activity exists beneath the ice. Mountains are buried beneath kilometers of frozen material. Ancient faults cut through the bedrock. Pressure can fracture ice and rock into remarkably clean shapes. Glaciers can carve valleys with astonishing precision. Over millions of years, nature can create formations that appear engineered. This is why photographs alone are rarely enough. A mysterious image can start an investigation. It cannot finish one. And this is where many Antarctic mysteries become distorted. A satellite image appears online. Someone circles a strange shape. A dramatic explanation is added. Then another person reposts it. Soon the original image is surrounded by claims that were never part of the evidence. A natural formation becomes a hidden base. A shadow becomes an entrance. A mountain becomes a pyramid. An ice feature becomes a crashed spacecraft. And eventually, the theory becomes more famous than the original discovery. The red gate could easily fall into the same cycle. But there is a way to separate mystery from imagination. Follow the physical evidence. If the gate is artificial, there should be more than one indication. There should be a relationship between the structure and its surroundings. There may be tracks, excavated material, tool marks, different layers of sediment, unusual magnetic signatures, changes in density, or objects located nearby. A genuine archaeological site leaves a context, and context is everything. Imagine, for example, that researchers approached the Red Gate and found a buried pathway extending hundreds of meters into the surrounding ice. That would be significant. Then imagine they discovered repeated stone blocks along that path. More significant. Then imagine those blocks contained evidence of deliberate shaping. Now the mystery would become a scientific investigation. But if researchers instead discovered that the supposed gate was simply a naturally fractured rock face, the mystery would end. That is not disappointing. It is science working exactly as it should. Yet Antarctica has another feature that makes every discovery feel more dramatic. Time. The ice does not simply cover the land. It preserves it. In many places, ancient material can remain trapped beneath layers that accumulated year after year. Every layer is part of a geological archive. Deep ice cores have allowed scientists to reconstruct atmospheric conditions hundreds of thousands of years into the past. Tiny bubbles trapped inside the ice contain samples of ancient air. Dust particles reveal environmental changes. Chemical signatures provide clues about volcanic eruptions and atmospheric composition. The ice is effectively a time machine. And if a structure existed before the current Antarctic environment developed, evidence of it could potentially be preserved beneath that same ice. This is where the story becomes genuinely fascinating. The most important discovery might not be the gate itself. It could be whatever lies around it. A buried road, a foundation, ancient organic material, a layer of sediment disturbed by construction, or even something as simple as charcoal. Charcoal would be extraordinary because it could provide evidence of fire. And if that fire could be reliably dated to a period when humans were not believed to have reached Antarctica, the implications would be enormous. But again, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. A piece of material found near a structure does not automatically prove that humans created the structure. Researchers would need to determine whether the material was deposited naturally, transported by water, carried by wind, or placed there intentionally. They would need multiple independent lines of evidence. Only then could the story move from speculation to history. There is another possibility that receives far less attention. The Red Gate might not be ancient at all. It could be modern. Antarctica has hosted military expeditions, scientific missions, aircraft operations, research stations, temporary camps, and countless exploration projects. Structures have been built and abandoned. Equipment has been buried. Vehicles have disappeared beneath moving snow. Fuel containers and scientific instruments have been left behind. Some have been swallowed by the ice. Others have been exposed decades later. A strange structure discovered today might therefore have a surprisingly recent origin. This is why historical records matter. Researchers would need to compare the location with expedition maps, satellite imagery from previous decades, aircraft routes, station records, geological surveys, and scientific databases. If the structure appeared suddenly in modern imagery, that would tell us something. If it existed in images from 50 years ago, that would tell us something else. And if it appeared beneath layers of ice that predate modern exploration, the story would change completely. The timeline is the key. Because Antarctica is a place where the past and present can exist almost on top of each other. A modern object can become buried beneath ancient-looking snow. An ancient landscape can remain hidden beneath ice. And geological structures can resemble architecture. Everything depends on knowing when something appeared. That is why the discovery of the Red Gate, if properly documented, would require more than a photograph. It would require excavation, mapping, dating, sampling, and independent verification. Until then, the gate remains suspended between two worlds. On one side is science, where every strange feature eventually demands a physical explanation. On the other is mystery, where the unanswered questions become part of the story. And Antarctica has always lived between those worlds. For centuries, it represented the unknown. Today, satellites can photograph it from orbit. Aircraft can scan beneath its ice. Robots can enter environments humans cannot safely reach. Scientists can drill into frozen archives that contain air from ancient worlds. Yet despite all this technology, enormous areas remain poorly understood. The continent is still capable of surprising us. That may be the most important clue of all. Because if the Red Gate is real, it may not be the end of the mystery. It may be the beginning. Somewhere beyond that red surface could be nothing more than ancient stone. There could be a natural cavern. There could be a hidden geological system. There could be evidence of an abandoned modern expedition. Or, in the most extraordinary possibility, there could be something that forces historians and scientists to rethink a chapter of human history. The ice has preserved Antarctica for longer than our civilization has existed. And now, as the climate changes and the ice begins to retreat in some regions, more of that buried world is slowly becoming visible. The question is no longer whether Antarctica contains secrets. It clearly does. The real question is whether we are prepared for what happens when those secrets finally emerge. But the deeper we look into Antarctica, the more complicated the story becomes. The Red Gate does not exist in isolation. Across the continent, explorers and researchers have encountered formations that seem to belong to different worlds. Some are clearly geological. Others are products of ice, wind, and erosion. And a few remain difficult to interpret from the limited information available. This is where Antarctica's hidden landscape becomes truly fascinating. Beneath the enormous ice sheet is a continent that looks nothing like the surface above it. There are mountain ranges buried beneath kilometers of ice. There are valleys larger than many countries. There are ancient river systems that have not seen sunlight for millions of years. And beneath all of this, scientists have identified enormous bodies of water. One of the most famous is Lake Vostok. Hidden beneath roughly 4 kilometers of ice, Lake Vostok is one of the largest known subglacial lakes on Earth. It remained sealed away from the surface for an extraordinary length of time. Think about what that means. Above the lake is a frozen wilderness. Below it is liquid water. And between those two worlds is a massive layer of ice. The existence of Lake Vostok changed the way scientists viewed Antarctica. The continent was no longer simply a frozen block of land. It was a dynamic system. Water could move beneath the ice. Heat from the Earth's interior could influence the environment. And ancient landscapes could remain preserved beneath the frozen surface. This discovery also gave rise to another question. How many hidden environments remain undiscovered? Researchers have continued mapping Antarctica using airborne radar and satellite measurements. Every new survey adds another piece to the underground map. Some areas reveal deep valleys. Others show ridges and mountains. Some reveal channels where water appears to have flowed beneath the ice. These discoveries are important because they demonstrate just how much of Antarctica remains invisible. We have mapped the surface. We are beginning to map what lies underneath. But there are still enormous gaps. And whenever those gaps exist, speculation naturally follows. Could the Red Gate be connected to one of these hidden environments? There is currently no reliable evidence proving such a connection. But the possibility is exactly what makes the location so intriguing. Imagine that the structure is positioned above an ancient valley. Perhaps the gate is not a gateway at all. Perhaps it is simply the visible edge of a much larger geological formation. Or imagine something more unusual. A structure sits directly above a subglacial cavity. Radar reveals an empty space behind it. The ice around the structure behaves differently. Magnetic readings show an unusual pattern. Suddenly, the investigation changes. Scientists would no longer be asking whether the Red Gate looks artificial. They would be asking what lies beneath it. And this is where modern technology becomes more important than ever. Because Antarctica is one of the few places where human eyes cannot simply walk into the unknown. A mountain hidden beneath 4 kilometers of ice cannot be explored with a shovel. A buried lake cannot be reached without specialized drilling. A suspected tunnel cannot be entered without understanding its stability. This is why scientists rely on instruments. Radar sends signals through the ice. Those signals reflect from different layers and surfaces. By measuring how long the signals take to return, researchers can construct an image of what lies below. It is almost like using sound to see through darkness. Not every shape can be identified perfectly. A reflection may represent rock. It may represent water. It may represent a change in ice density. And sometimes, several possibilities can produce similar signals. This is another reason mysterious Antarctic images can be misleading. A 2-dimensional image may suggest a doorway. A 3-dimensional scan might reveal something completely different. The human brain is also extremely good at finding familiar shapes. We see faces in clouds. We see animals in rock formations. We see buildings in mountains. And when a mysterious image is presented with a dramatic story, our brains naturally search for evidence that supports the story. Antarctica is filled with opportunities for this effect. A ridge becomes a pyramid. A shadow becomes a vehicle. A circular formation becomes a spacecraft. A dark opening becomes a tunnel. And a red surface becomes a gate. But sometimes the strange interpretation is not completely wrong. That is what makes the investigation difficult. There are genuine mysteries. There are genuine discoveries. There are genuine structures. The challenge is separating them from mistakes and exaggerations. Consider Antarctica's ancient past. The continent was not always the frozen world we see today. Millions of years ago, its climate was dramatically different. And much farther back, during the age of dinosaurs, parts of Antarctica supported forests. Trees grew where glaciers now dominate. Rivers crossed landscapes that are today buried beneath ice. Animals lived in environments that seem impossible when compared with modern Antarctica. Fossils have confirmed this. And those fossils tell us something important. Antarctica has already undergone enormous environmental transformations. The frozen continent we know today is only one chapter in its history. Beneath the ice is another Antarctica. And beneath that ancient landscape are traces of even older worlds. This is why some researchers describe the continent as a natural archive. It preserves evidence that has disappeared elsewhere. But preservation creates another problem. The deeper scientists look, the harder the environment becomes. Ice pressure increases. Temperatures drop. Equipment becomes more difficult to operate. And contamination becomes a serious concern. If scientists drill into an isolated environment, they must be extremely careful not to introduce modern organisms into an ancient ecosystem. That concern became especially important during research into subglacial lakes. What if life exists there? Not intelligent beings, not aliens, something potentially more fascinating from a scientific perspective. Microorganisms that evolved in isolation. Life adapted to darkness. Life surviving under enormous pressure. Life existing without the sunlight that powers most ecosystems on the surface. Such discoveries would not prove an underground civilization, but they would prove something equally important. Life can survive in places once considered impossible. And that changes how we think about hidden environments not only on Earth, but beyond it. If microorganisms can survive beneath Antarctic ice, similar environments might exist beneath the ice of moons such as Europa or Enceladus. In that sense, Antarctica is not just a place to study Earth's past. It is also a laboratory for understanding other worlds. Yet the Red Gate mystery continues to pull the story back towards something much more human. Who could have built it? If it is artificial, When was it constructed? And why would anyone build a structure in one of the most hostile environments on Earth? One possibility is modern exploration. Military expeditions once traveled through Antarctica under conditions that are difficult to imagine today. Operation High Jump, launched by the United States after World War II, involved ships, aircraft, personnel, and equipment on a scale that captured public attention. The operation had legitimate military and logistical objectives, but its size and rapid conclusion later became the foundation for countless theories. Stories emerged about secret discoveries, hidden territories, unidentified aircraft, and mysterious encounters beneath the ice. Most of these claims remain unsupported, but the secrecy surrounding military operations during the early Cold War created fertile ground for speculation. Then came the Antarctic Treaty. Signed in 1959 and entering into force in 1961, it established Antarctica as a continent dedicated to peaceful purposes and scientific cooperation. Military activity was restricted. Nuclear explosions and radioactive waste disposal were prohibited. Scientific investigation became central to the treaty system. To most historians, the agreement represented an extraordinary example of international cooperation during a tense period. But conspiracy theories interpreted it differently. Why would rival nations agree to restrict military activity in such a strategically important region? What did they know? What had they seen? Was the treaty simply about protecting Antarctica and preventing conflict? Or did it conceal something more important? There is no credible evidence that the treaty was created to hide an ancient civilization or extraterrestrial technology. But the mystery persists because Antarctica remains difficult for ordinary people to access. The less accessible a place becomes, the easier it is for stories to grow around it. And the Red Gate fits perfectly into that environment. A remote structure, a frozen landscape, a continent filled with genuine scientific mysteries, and decades of legends about what might exist beneath the ice. But there is one detail that could eventually settle everything: physical evidence. If researchers can reach the structure, they can determine its composition. If it is metal, that tells us something. If it is stone, that tells us something else. If it is volcanic material, the geological explanation becomes stronger. If there are manufactured components, the investigation takes an entirely different direction. The same applies to the ground around it. A true archaeological structure should have a history written into the surrounding material. Layers can reveal when the area was disturbed. Sediments can reveal whether objects were transported. Ice can reveal when something became buried. Even tiny particles can provide clues. The Red Gate does not need a spectacular explanation. It needs evidence. And perhaps that is the most important lesson hidden inside the entire mystery. Antarctica does not need aliens, lost civilizations, or secret armies to be extraordinary. The real continent is already extraordinary enough. It contains mountains hidden beneath ice, lakes trapped in darkness, ancient air preserved for hundreds of thousands of years, fossils from vanished ecosystems, volcanic landscapes buried beneath frozen deserts, and geological structures that have remained untouched for longer than human civilization has existed. But if the Red Gate is eventually proven to be artificial, then all of those discoveries will suddenly become part of a much larger question. Not what Antarctica is hiding, but who was there before us? And that is the question that could transform a strange red structure into one of the most important discoveries of the modern age. But there is another possibility that makes the mystery of the Red Gate even more disturbing. What if the gate is not something that was built on the surface? What if the surface is what came later? For most of human history, we imagined Antarctica as a frozen wasteland, a continent of endless white, surrounded by violent oceans and almost impossible to reach. But modern science has revealed a very different picture. The ice is not the continent. It is a layer covering the continent. And beneath that layer is an ancient world that existed long before the ice arrived. Mountain ranges stretch beneath the frozen surface. Deep valleys cut through buried rock. Ancient river systems remain hidden under kilometers of ice. In some regions, scientists have even detected enormous structures in the bedrock that were completely invisible from the surface. This raises an uncomfortable question. How much of Antarctica's real history have we never seen? Imagine removing the ice. The landscape would change completely. Instead of a flat white desert, you might see mountains, valleys, rivers, forests, and coastlines that existed millions of years ago. And somewhere within that buried landscape, there could be structures whose true age is impossible to determine from the surface alone. This is why the Red Gate has attracted so much attention. Not because a red structure automatically proves an ancient civilization, but because Antarctica is one of the few places on Earth where an ancient landscape can remain sealed beneath an enormous natural archive. If something was built before the ice expanded across the continent, the structure could potentially have remained hidden for thousands, perhaps even millions of years. The problem is that such a claim would challenge almost everything we understand about human history. There is currently no reliable evidence that an advanced human civilization existed in Antarctica before the continent became heavily glaciated. But there is also something scientists cannot ignore. Antarctica has changed dramatically over geological time. The continent has moved. Its climate has transformed. Its ecosystems have disappeared, and enormous portions of its ancient surface are now inaccessible. That means the archaeological record of Antarctica is fundamentally different from almost anywhere else. In warmer regions, ancient settlements can be excavated layer by layer. In Antarctica, the evidence may be buried under ice hundreds or thousands of meters thick. A city could not simply be discovered by digging. It would first have to be detected remotely. That makes technology the key to the entire mystery. Satellites can reveal surface changes. Radar can penetrate ice. Gravity measurements can identify variations in the hidden landscape. Seismic waves can reveal underground structures. And increasingly sophisticated aircraft can survey enormous areas in relatively short periods of time. Every technological improvement gives scientists another way to look through the ice. And sometimes, those instruments reveal things that nobody expected. One of the most important discoveries has been the enormous network of water beneath the Antarctic ice sheet. Scientists once imagined the ice as relatively static. But the reality is much more dynamic. Water can move beneath the ice. It can lubricate the base of glaciers. It can alter how quickly ice flows toward the ocean. Subglacial lakes can fill and drain. Entire hidden drainage systems can exist beneath a landscape that appears completely motionless from above. This discovery has implications far beyond the Red Gate. It means Antarctica is not a dead world. It is active. It moves. It changes. And the ice itself is part of a complicated system connecting the atmosphere, ocean, rock, and hidden water below. Now imagine finding an unexplained structure inside such an environment. The first challenge would be determining whether it is actually a structure. A rectangular shape seen through snow could be a building, or it could be exposed rock. A circular depression could be a crater, or it could be an ancient volcanic feature. A straight line could be a road, or it could be a fracture in the ice. The Antarctic environment creates endless opportunities for visual illusions. Snow can hide edges. Ice can distort shapes. Shadows can create false dimensions. Satellite images can compress a three-dimensional landscape into a flat picture. And when people examine those images looking for mysteries, they often find exactly what they expect to find. But there are cases where multiple forms of evidence point toward the same location. That is when a mystery becomes worth investigating. Suppose the red gate appears in satellite imagery. Then radar detects a vertical boundary behind it. A second survey finds a large cavity. A third measurement identifies unusual mineral content. Suddenly, the feature is no longer just a photograph. It becomes a physical anomaly, and physical anomalies can be tested. This is the dividing line between speculation and science. A theory can suggest where to look. Evidence determines what is actually there. Perhaps the most fascinating possibility is that the red gate could be connected to an ancient geological boundary. Antarctica contains enormous volcanic systems. Some are still active. Others have been dormant for millions of years. Underneath the ice, volcanic heat can create liquid water and unusual formations. In certain locations, geothermal activity may produce cavities, tunnels, and altered rock. A structure formed through volcanic activity could appear remarkably artificial, especially when viewed from above. This possibility is important because Antarctica's geology is far stranger than the surface suggests. There are volcanoes hidden beneath the ice. There are geothermal hotspots. There are mountain ranges that rival some of the most dramatic landscapes on the planet. And there are places where the ice is thinner because heat rises from below. So perhaps the Red Gate is not an entrance to a lost civilization. Perhaps it is an opening created by the Earth's own forces. But even that explanation would raise another question. Why is it red? The answer could be mineral oxidation. Iron-rich rock can produce deep red and orange colors. Volcanic material can also create unusual contrasts against white ice. And when exposed to sunlight, certain minerals become dramatically visible. Nature does not need human intervention to create something that looks like a warning sign. In fact, the color red has appeared in some of Antarctica's most famous natural phenomena. Blood Falls is perhaps the perfect example. The strange red water flowing from Taylor Glacier looks almost impossible. For years, people wondered whether it was caused by algae, pollution, or something more mysterious. Scientists eventually found a much more fascinating explanation involving iron-rich salty water emerging from beneath the glacier. The iron oxidizes when it reaches the surface, producing the distinctive red color. The lesson is simple. Antarctica can create things that look fictional, and sometimes the real explanation is more interesting than the legend. But there is another element that makes the Red Gate story so powerful: the human fascination with doors. A doorway represents transition. One side is known, the other is unknown. Across cultures, stories have used gates to represent hidden worlds, forbidden knowledge, underground kingdoms, and places where ordinary rules no longer apply. That symbolism has followed the Red Gate from the beginning. People do not simply see a structure. They imagine what could be behind it. A tunnel, a chamber, a forgotten facility, a buried settlement, a laboratory, or something completely unknown. But imagination can become dangerous when it replaces evidence. The history of Antarctica is already filled with legends that grew far beyond their original sources. Stories about hidden civilizations, secret military bases, Nazi installations, UFO crashes, ancient maps, underground cities, and mysterious expeditions. Some began with real events. Others were based on misunderstood documents. Still others appeared much later through books, television programs, and internet communities. The Red Gate now sits inside that enormous web of Antarctic mythology, and that makes verification more important than ever. If scientists eventually reach the location, they will not begin by opening the gate. They will begin by documenting it. They will photograph every surface, map its position, measure its dimensions, analyze the surrounding ice, collect rock and sediment samples, check for signs of modern equipment, search for evidence of human activity, and compare the location with historical expedition records. Only after all of that would they attempt to determine what the structure actually is. And there is a very good reason for such caution. Antarctica is dangerous. A mistake can become fatal. Temperatures can fall rapidly. Visibility can disappear in minutes. Ice can crack without warning. Equipment can fail. And rescue may be hundreds of kilometers away. Even reaching a suspected site can require enormous logistical planning. This is why many Antarctic discoveries are made remotely. Scientists can learn a surprising amount without physically standing beside an object. But remote sensing has limits. Eventually, if the red gate is important enough, someone will need to see it directly. That moment could become one of the most extraordinary scientific expeditions in modern Antarctic history. Because imagine the first researcher approaching the structure. The wind is moving across the ice. There is nothing around for kilometers. No city, no road, no familiar landmark. Only the frozen continent. And ahead, a vertical red surface rises from the white landscape. At that moment, every theory becomes irrelevant. The only thing that matters is what the evidence says. The researcher touches the surface. Is it stone? Metal? Ice? Something else? A scan is taken. A sample is collected. The surrounding area is mapped. And perhaps, for the first time, the mystery becomes physical. Maybe the red gate turns out to be a natural formation. That would still make it a remarkable geological discovery. Maybe it is a remnant of a modern expedition. That would become an important horizon and imagined a continent beyond the known world. Today, we have satellites, aircraft, radar, autonomous instruments, and advanced geological models. Yet the same feeling remains. There is still something beneath the ice, something waiting to be understood. And if the red gate is real, perhaps it is not a doorway into a secret civilization at all. Perhaps it is a doorway into a much older story. A story written not by kings or explorers, but by ice, fire, water, and time. A story that began long before humans arrived. And perhaps the first red gate is only one visible piece of a much larger landscape still buried beneath Antarctica. Because once one hidden structure is found, the question becomes impossible to avoid. How many more are out there? And how much of the frozen continent is still waiting to be revealed? For generations, Antarctica was imagined as the edge of the known world. A blank space. A place where maps became uncertain and imagination took over. But today, the blank space is slowly disappearing. Satellites watch the continent from above. Aircraft scan beneath the ice. Radar reveals mountains that no human eye has seen. And every new layer of information creates another question. Because the more we learn about Antarctica, the less simple it becomes. The red gate is only one part of that mystery. If the structure is genuine, its location may be more important than its appearance. Why there? Why in that particular region of Antarctica? And what existed there before the ice transformed the continent? To understand those questions, we have to go backward. Not decades, not centuries, millions of years. Long before Antarctica became the frozen continent we recognize today, its climate was dramatically different. There were forests, there were rivers, there were wetlands. There were ecosystems capable of supporting animals that would seem completely out of place in Antarctica today. The continent was once connected to other land masses as part of the ancient supercontinent Gondwana. Over immense periods of time, tectonic forces changed its position. The land moved, oceans opened, climate systems changed, and eventually, Antarctica became increasingly isolated around the South Pole. As temperatures fell, ice began spreading across the continent. Layer after layer accumulated. Snow became compressed. Ice thickened. And the ancient landscape slowly disappeared. But it did not vanish. It was buried. That distinction is critical, because beneath the modern Antarctic ice sheet, the old continent still exists. Its mountains are still there. Its valleys are still there. Its ancient drainage systems are still there. The evidence of former environments remains trapped beneath the frozen surface. In other words, Antarctica is not simply hiding objects. It is hiding entire landscapes. And if the Red Gate is connected to an ancient feature, understanding that buried landscape could be the key. One of the most extraordinary things scientists have discovered is that some parts of the hidden terrain are remarkably well preserved. Ice can protect surfaces from erosion. It can isolate geological features from weather. It can preserve ancient material in conditions unlike almost anywhere else on Earth. This creates an unusual archaeological problem. A structure buried beneath Antarctic ice may be protected from destruction, but it can also remain almost impossible to reach. Imagine discovering the outline of a building beneath 2 or 3 kilometers of ice. You cannot simply excavate it. The amount of material that would need to be removed would be enormous. Instead, scientists would first need to understand the object remotely. Radar, seismic imaging, gravity measurements, magnetic surveys. Each method would reveal another part of the hidden picture. And if several independent methods produced the same result, confidence would increase. This is how the Red Gate could eventually be investigated. Not through rumors, not through blurry photographs, but through layers of evidence. The first layer would be visual. What exactly does the structure look like? The second would be geological. What material surrounds it? The third would be physical. Does it produce an unusual radar or magnetic signature? The fourth would be chronological. How long has it been there? And the fifth would be archaeological. Is there evidence that something intelligent constructed or modified it? That final question would be the most difficult, because intelligence leaves patterns. A natural rock formation can be symmetrical, but a natural formation does not normally produce repeated architectural dimensions. A glacier can create straight lines, but it does not usually create a sequence of equally spaced chambers. A volcanic process can produce cavities, but it does not intentionally create handles, hinges, stairs, or inscriptions. These distinctions are what researchers would look for. And this is where the idea of a gate becomes particularly interesting. A gate is not simply a wall. It implies a boundary. Something is separated from something else. There is an outside, and there is an inside. If the Red Gate has an actual opening mechanism, hinges, frame, or interior chamber, the evidence for artificial construction would become much stronger. But if it is simply a colored rock wall, the story changes completely. That is why descriptions alone are not enough. The physical structure must speak for itself. And Antarctica has a way of making that difficult. Snow accumulates. Wind moves it. Ice flows. Surfaces disappear and reappear. A feature that looks exposed today may have been buried yesterday. Another feature may have been hidden for centuries and suddenly become visible. This dynamic environment can create the illusion that objects appear out of nowhere. Satellite imagery has made this phenomenon even more dramatic. Modern users can explore parts of Antarctica from their computers. They can zoom into remote valleys, follow coastlines, examine mountains, search for unusual shapes, and sometimes they discover something that looks completely out of place. But the problem is that satellite imagery is not always intuitive. A photograph from above can make distance difficult to judge. A small object can look enormous. A shadow can look like a physical structure. Snow can hide important details. And image processing can exaggerate contrast. This has created countless Antarctic mysteries. Some are later explained. Others remain uncertain. And a few become internet legends. The Red Gate could become one of those legends unless researchers can establish a clear chain of evidence. There is another reason the story has become so powerful. Antarctica already has a history of discoveries that sound almost fictional. Take the hidden lakes beneath the ice. When scientists first began realizing how much liquid water existed beneath Antarctica, the idea seemed extraordinary. Today, subglacial lakes are a recognized part of the continent's hidden environment. Or consider the ancient atmosphere preserved inside ice cores. Tiny bubbles contain samples of air from a world that existed hundreds of thousands of years ago. Researchers can analyze those bubbles to understand past climates. This means Antarctica allows scientists to study events that happened long before modern civilization. The ice is effectively recording Earth's history, and that makes the possibility of a preserved human structure especially fascinating. If something existed before the ice covered it, the surrounding layers could potentially provide a timeline. Ice accumulates sequentially. Older layers are generally deeper. Younger layers are closer to the surface. If a structure disturbed an ancient surface, scientists could potentially identify that disturbance. This is one of the most powerful tools in the investigation. Time leaves evidence, and evidence can sometimes be dated. But there is a major problem. Even if an object is found beneath ancient ice, that does not automatically mean the object itself is equally ancient. Ice can move. Glaciers can transport material. Rock can fracture. Objects can become buried and later exposed. Therefore, scientists would need to understand the local geology before drawing conclusions. This is why Antarctica demands patience. Every clue creates another question, and every answer can produce another mystery. Suppose researchers determine that the red gate is made from an unusual mineral. Where did that material come from? Was it formed locally? Was it transported? Was it processed? If it contains metals, are those metals naturally occurring? If there are unusual alloys, how were they produced? If there are markings, are they geological fractures or deliberate symbols? Each answer would narrow the possibilities. And eventually, one explanation would have to survive. This is how real mysteries are solved. Not with one dramatic discovery, with dozens of small pieces that gradually fit together. But there is another possibility that cannot be ignored. The Red Gate may have nothing to do with an ancient civilization at all. It could belong to the modern era. Antarctica has been visited by military forces, scientists, explorers, engineers, pilots, and researchers for more than a century. Temporary facilities have been constructed. Equipment has been transported across the ice. Aircraft have landed in remote regions. Vehicles have traveled across areas that are now buried. Some objects have disappeared into the ice. Others have been abandoned. And historical records are not always complete. A modern structure could therefore become mysterious, simply because its origin was forgotten. This is one reason historical archives would be essential. Expedition journals, aircraft logs, photographs, maps, satellite imagery, research station records, even weather reports. A structure that appears ancient could suddenly become much less mysterious if an old photograph shows the same feature decades earlier. But imagine the opposite. Imagine researchers discover that the Red Gate appears in no known modern records. Then they compare satellite images from different decades. The structure remains fixed. The surrounding ice changes. But the gate does not. They conduct radar surveys. The structure continues beneath the surface. They examine the material. It is unlike the surrounding rock. And then they discover something else. A second shape, several hundred meters away. Then another, and another. At that moment, the Red Gate would no longer be an isolated anomaly. It would be part of a pattern. And patterns are where history can change. because one unexplained object can be dismissed. Two can be coincidence. But a coordinated network is much harder to explain. This is why the next stage of Antarctic exploration may be so important. We are moving from simply photographing the continent to understanding its hidden architecture. Not architecture created by humans necessarily, but the structure of the landscape itself. Mountains, basins, water systems, fault lines, volcanic regions, ancient valleys. Every discovery adds another layer. And somewhere within that enormous frozen system, the Red Gate may eventually reveal what it truly is. A natural formation, a forgotten modern structure, a geological doorway into an underground cavity, or something that forces scientists to reconsider what was once believed impossible. For now, the ice keeps the answer hidden. And perhaps that is what makes Antarctica different from every other mysterious place on Earth. The mystery is not merely waiting in a dark room. It is buried beneath millions of tons of ice. For years, the continent has produced isolated anomalies,